For 27 years, I was a nun. I lived behind the stone walls of a convent where silence was sacred, obedience was law, and the darkest truths were buried alongside the deepest sins. Today, after nearly 3 decades of silence, I have decided to speak, and what you're about to hear might change everything you believe about what really happens behind the church's closed doors. Because not every habit hides holiness, and not all faith is pure. Take a deep breath. This story is real. It begins with a girl full of hope and ends with secrets the Vatican never wanted you to know. Asterisk. I joined the convent when I was just 19. I came from a deeply religious family, raised to believe that my destiny was to serve God. They told me I had a calling. They said my soul was pure, and that behind those walls I would find purpose, peace, and holiness. And for a while, I believed them. The truth is, when I first walked into that convent, I thought I was walking into heaven on earth. But slowly, quietly, the cracks began to show. Asterisk. I entered the convent when I was just 19 years old. Raised in a deeply religious family, I grew up hearing that my destiny was to serve God. They told me I had a calling, that my heart was pure, and that behind those gates, I would find peace, purpose, and protection. At first, everything felt sacred: the daily prayers, the respectful silence, the scent of burning candles at the altar. But as time went on, I began to notice something hidden beneath all that holiness: a layer of fear, of rules that didn't make sense, and orders that could never be questioned. It felt like, to serve God, I had to completely erase who I was. Asterisk. The days in the convent were always the same. We woke up before sunrise, knelt before the altar, chanted the same psalms, and then moved on to our tasks. Every minute was accounted for, every action watched. Some sisters were kind, like silent mothers. Others seemed to carry years of pain on their faces, pain they were never allowed to speak of. One of them, who lived in the cell next to mine, used to cry softly almost every night. I never knew why. I never had the courage to ask, because inside those walls, questions were dangerous, and silence was the only answer you were allowed to give. Asterisk. But it was on a cold, early morning, while I was cleaning the chapel, that I first realized something was terribly wrong. I was alone, collecting burned-out candles, when I heard voices coming from the convent's basement, a place I had always believed had been abandoned for years. The voices were in Latin, but they didn't sound like prayers. They sounded like ... arguments, commands, harsh words spoken with anger. I tried to approach quietly, but just as I reached the door, someone locked it from the inside before I could see who was there. The next day, I acted like nothing had happened, but that moment haunted me. And it wasn't the last time. Slowly, other sisters began to disappear. Asterisk. They would leave without warning. No goodbyes, no explanations, just empty rooms and whispers that they had been transferred. But something about the way the others avoided talking about it, something about how their belongings were left behind, untouched, made my heart sink. It felt like we were being watched, like the walls themselves were hiding something, and I knew, if I kept digging, I might uncover something I wasn't meant to survive. Asterisk. Inside that room, time felt frozen. The walls were lined with old wooden shelves, filled with dusty documents, torn letters, and boxes sealed with wax. At the center, there was a small wooden altar, but instead of a cross, it held a locked chest. Around it, strange symbols were etched into the floor. It didn't look like a place of worship. It looked like a place of secrets. I approached slowly, my hands trembling. I opened one of the boxes and found files, medical reports, confessions, personal letters, all from nuns who had disappeared. Some were pregnant, some had accused priests of abuse. Others had simply asked too many questions. One document read, "Transferred for disciplinary silence," but I knew now what that really meant. They weren't transferred, they were erased. Asterisk. I left that room shaking, trying to act normal, but something inside me had shifted. I couldn't pray the same way. I couldn't smile with the same sisters who had looked the other way for so long. I wanted to speak. I wanted to scream, but I knew what happened to those who did. Still, I started writing everything down, every name, every date, every document I remembered. It was my only weapon, my only proof. But the more I wrote, the more terrified I became, because I realized I was being watched. Shadows in the hallways, whispers behind doors. One morning, I woke up to find my journal missing from under my bed. Asterisk. That was the moment I knew I had to leave. not just to protect myself, but because if I stayed, I'd lose what little faith I had left. I packed only what I could carry. I didn't say goodbye. I walked away from the convent I had called home for nearly 3 decades, with nothing but the truth I had hidden inside me. The outside world was nothing like I remembered. I had no money, no connections, but for the first time in years, I felt free, free to breathe, free to question, and free to tell this story. I stayed silent for many years, out of fear, out of shame, out of hope that maybe someone else would come forward first, but no one ever did. The church never spoke of the missing sisters, the files were never released, and those rooms, I'm sure they've been sealed again. But I've carried this truth alone for too long, and now, I'm done carrying it. I don't share this story to attack anyone's faith. I still believe in God. I still believe in love, in forgiveness, and in truth. But I also believe that silence can be deadly, and if you've listened this far, maybe it's because you needed to hear this. Maybe you've felt the same fear. Maybe you've seen things others pretend not to see. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to pay attention. Because behind the prayers, behind the candles and the choir songs, sometimes there's a darkness, and if no one speaks, it only grows stronger.